Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is the podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I am happy to be back with you. My husband and I recently moved. It's actually been a week. We moved a week ago, and I just found the coffee yesterday or the day before yesterday, so it's been a trying time, as you can imagine. We spent the weekend moving, and we've been unpacking, and we've been doing all of that wonderful moving, unpacking, transitioning stuff. And I also started a new job on Monday, because why not move over the weekend and then start a new job the following Monday, right? I think that's an excellent plan. In fact, I think that I am pretty much living the plot of 90% of all the Hallmark movies out there, right? It's usually a young woman who moves to a new town, gets a new job. The only difference here is that I'm already married. I'm not going to meet a charming stranger in my new town or at my new job. I don't know. Maybe I could pretend. Maybe we could role play, and my husband could be the charming stranger and sweep me off my feet, and we can have happily ever after. Don't get me wrong. I am not mocking Hallmark movies. I love me some Hallmark movies. I love me some cheesy Christmas movies this time of year. Just makes me want to watch every cheesy Christmas movie in the world. I don't care if they're predictable. I don't care if I know exactly what's going to happen. That's what I like about them. I like knowing there's going to be a happily ever after. There's going to be some conflict. You know, they're going to seem like maybe they're going to break up at some point. It'll all work out. There will be Christmas trees. There will be fake snow. There will be fabulous sweaters and boots and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. But this episode is not about Hallmark Christmas movies, although not a bad idea. Think about that. Hallmark movies based on books. This episode is about moving, books that move. And because of our recent move, my parents moved twice before I was 2. So they moved from the tiny town in eastern Montana where they were living to the slightly bigger but still tiny town in western Montana where my dad got another teaching job, and they rented a house for a while until they found one to buy. So before I don't even think I was 2, maybe 18 months when we moved into the new house. We had moved twice, but I don't remember it. And then I lived in that house until I was 20 and went to college. So for the first good chunk of my life, I lived in the same house. My grandparents lived in the same houses. I knew where they were. They weren't in the same town, but they were close. Both sets within 2 hours of driving. And so moving to me was kind of foreign. The first time I moved was when I moved to college. And then I have moved, I think this most recent move has been like the 29th time. If you count every little move from, dorm room to the summer job, from the summer job back home, back from home to the new college housing, you move a lot when you're going to school. So between undergrad and graduate school, there was all those moves. So this was just one of many, many moves. But you don't care. Maybe you do. I don't know. How many times have you moved? I'm curious. I'm always curious to know. I know military families move a lot, and other types of careers and families move a lot. And so some people are really, really good at moving, and other people just put down roots and they stay there forever. And then when they do have to move, it's this whole crazy thing because they've been in one place for so long that they've, you start to accumulate stuff and you kind of grow in place and everything. At any rate, I was thinking about books and moving, and as I said, growing up, I didn't move at all. So I was thinking about books that I'd read as a child, and I've talked about my love of the Little House books. think part of the reason that they fascinated me, among many, many other things, historical fiction, etc., was the fact that this family moved pretty much in every book. They moved somewhere new, almost every book. And that was foreign to me. So it was fascinating to me. The first book, Little House in the Big Woods, we meet Laura and her family, and we meet her extended family. They go visiting extended family, and there's parties and all kinds of stuff. And then in the next book, Little House on the Prairie, they load their entire lives into a covered wagon and they leave. Little House in the Big Woods is in Wisconsin. They leave and they drive their covered wagon to the middle of nowhere. No family close, just them. And I thought, I can't even imagine moving, first of all, in a covered wagon, but to move away from family, I couldn't imagine that as a child because, like I said, my grandparents were close. I had an uncle who lived in Washington State and an aunt who was much more adventurous, and she lived lots of different places. So she was kind of my role model for adventure as a child because she moved quite a bit. So yeah, Little House on the Prairie, they moved all the time. After Little House on the Prairie, then they moved again. So Pa was building houses or building, they were always figuring out where to live and all of these interesting things. I couldn't imagine. Now, of course, I have lived away from home. I grew up in Montana. I have lived in California, in Texas, in Pennsylvania, and it's an adventure. I don't like being away from my family per se, but I'd really rather be much closer to my parents and my siblings and my nieces, but I'm not. At least I live in a time when I have the capability of talking to them over the phone, over Skype, all kinds of ways, texting, all those things. My sister and I were actually talking about this a couple weeks ago, where we'd both had weeks where we were just kind of tired and feeling overwhelmed, and we were so grateful that we could just pick up the phone and talk to each other, as opposed to writing letters that might take a month, 3 months, depending on what historical time period we're talking about and where we lived. If we lived on different continents, it could take months to get letters. So if you were trying to say, I'm having a really terrible day, it would take 3 months for the sister to get the letter. And then by the time she replied, 6 months would have passed, and you would have had 7,000 different moods between the time that you wrote the letter. So, Little House on the Prairie, one of my books about moving. They did it a lot. I was fascinated. Still glad I don't have to move my belongings in the back of a covered wagon. Very, very grateful for the moving truck that we used to move our stuff. Another book that came to mind when I was thinking about this topic is by Judith Viorst, and I think I've talked about her before on this podcast. She has a book called Alexander, Who's Not, in parentheses, do you hear me? I mean it, going to move. And Alexander is not going to leave his best friend Paul, or Rachel, the best babysitter in the world, or the Baldwins, who have a terrific dog named Swoozie, or Mr. and Mrs. Oberdorfer, who always give great treats on Halloween. Who cares if his father has a new job 1,000 miles away? Alexander is not. Do you hear him? He means it, going to move. Alexander's back, facing another of childhood's trials and tribulations with Judith Viorst's trademark humor and keen sense of what's important to kids. I love Alexander. I loved Alexander growing up. I love him just as much as an adult because he expresses things that the children in my life express. He expresses things that I expressed as a child, and heck, sometimes he expresses things that I feel as an adult. One of the things that I say when, some days are like that, even in Australia. If you've ever read Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, I always get those mixed up. I don't remember the exact order. But you know that some days are bad, even if you move to Australia. Hey, that one, it goes with the moving theme too. He keeps saying he's going to move to Australia because he's having such a bad day. But Alexander's family is moving and he does not like it. Change is hard. Transition is hard. And Alexander is expressing that he is not going to move. Thank you very much. He doesn't care. And how many children do you know who say things like that? Nope, I'm not going to do that. I mean, obviously they're not thinking about all of the all of the consequences of, your family moves and you stay. That's not the way it works. He is not going to move, and I just love that he expresses that he's going to miss his friends. He's going to miss the family that gives the good treats. No way is there ever going to be another place that is this good, right? And I think even as adults, we can understand that because it's hard. Transitions are hard. And even though I didn't move that far away, I just moved to a different part of the metropolitan area we live in. It's still hard. You got to find you got to figure out where the stores are. You got to figure out who your neighbors are and who's going to, be helpful or rude or all of those good things. And so I love that Alexander can be my spirit animal in this case. Speaking of spirit animals, no, I don't have a transition. So I want to talk to you about Audible. I talk about audiobooks a lot on the podcast. With this move, I now have a longer commute, which means more time to listen to audiobooks, which makes me very, very happy because I am so far behind on my to-be-read list. Audible is a service that I have used forever to get my audiobooks. And right now, yay hooray, you can get Audible for $6.95 a month for the first 3 months, which is over half off of their usual monthly fee. $6.95 a month for the first 3 months. You just need to go to their website, audible.com/GSMC book, or you can text GSMC book to 500 to get that deal. So audible.com/GSMC book or text GSMC book to 500. Audible is great because you pay that fee and then you get a credit every month. They also have something called Audible Originals now, and you get to choose 2 free Audible Originals every month. You can't get those audiobooks anywhere else. They've got some really interesting selections. I've found some that I am excited to listen to, and like I said, you get 2 every month. So with that $6.95 for those first 3 months, you get 3 titles every month. That is a little over $2 a title. That's not bad. You could give yourself the gift of Audible, or hey, holidays are coming. I'm sure there's someone in your life who could use the gift of audiobooks. So like I said, just go to audible.com/GSMC book or text GSMC book to 500 and you will get to take advantage of that awesome deal of $6.95 for the first 3 months. We are going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, talking about moving today. And still in that transitional phase of moving and starting a new job and doing all those good things, pretending that I've decided that I am just going to pretend that I am the heroine in a Hallmark Christmas movie. Doesn't even have to be a Christmas movie, but since it's December, I'm going to be the heroine in a Hallmark Christmas movie. I just moved. I just got a new job. Obviously, fabulous things are going to happen. And I'm going with it. So books about moving. You talked about Little House before the break because I was fascinated as a child with the fact that they moved so much. And then Alexander, who is not going to move. Thank you very much. There's a bunch of books, if you look it up, for books about moving and children's books about moving books to help children of a variety of ages with that transition, because that can be really hard and really confusing. We don't have children, but we do have dogs who spent all last week just following me around. And then the actual moving day, our girl dog finally just went and crawled into her bed and laid there and looked at me like, fine, I know, it's fine. I know you're not going to take me, so just pack up your stuff and go. I mean, she looked so sad all day. And then obviously we brought them with us. I mean, they're here and they're learning all their new boundaries and all that good stuff. But, so if there were books that I could have read to the dogs, I would have. But yeah, there's all kinds of books. There is a list on Goodreads that is 81 books. And it's just titled something like, it's titled Books Where People Move to a New Place. I love that. Who comes up with these lists and who puts them together? I don't even know, but I love it because it's great when you have a podcast. The very first book on this list is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. If you have listened to this podcast from the beginning, you know that I talked about Jane Eyre in my very first episode, and I love Jane Eyre. I know I probably love the wrong Bronte sister that everyone talks about Wuthering Heights, but I love Jane Eyre. I love that Jane is, sort of plain and quiet and smart. Maybe that's why I like her. Maybe because I'm kind of plain and quiet and fairly smart. But it is true. Jane Eyre does move a couple of times in this book. First, she is sent away to school, which is terrible. She has a terrible time at school, but she does transition into being a teacher, which then leads her to taking a position with family that so much drama. She becomes a governess. And of course, that's where she meets the enigmatic, somewhat grumpy Mr. Rochester, and that changes her life. She does move again because they have, I guess you could call it a falling out. I mean, finding out that the man you're about to marry, finding out at the altar that the man you're about to marry has a, sadly, mentally ill wife living in the attic kind of ruins your wedding day. Yeah, I hope that wasn't a spoiler, but the book's like 200 years old, so can it be a spoiler then? I don't know. Probably. I apologize. I love Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is maybe not everyone's heroine, but she just keeps moving forward, and she takes what's given to her, and she just keeps moving forward with this sort of steadfast gentleness, and she doesn't lose heart. She kind of seems to for a bit, but she just keeps moving forward, and I really appreciate about her. And maybe Jane Eyre is kind of the original Hallmark movie. She does move, she does meet that man, it changes her life, and they have a conflict. They may or may not make it, and then they do get there happily ever after. Sense and Sensibility is number 3 on this book, on this list. That is Jane Austen, and of course the family in Sense and Sensibility has to move because of inheritance issues, and then you get all of those wonderful relationship stories about the sisters and finding potential mates, trying to find that man who has the best situation for them. And Sense and Sensibility, I also love that book. Not as much as Pride and Prejudice, but I do love the book. I mean, I love that the one sister just gets ridiculously sick because she's out walking in the rain and upset. I think there may have been something else going on, but hey, she was out walking in the rain and she was sad and she was upset and she got sick, but that changed her life. See, that walk where she was moving, different kind of moving, changed her life. The Grapes of Wrath is on here. Obviously that's about moving. Chocolat is on here. I have not read Chocolat. I love, love, love that movie. I need to read that book. And oh, look, it says Chocolat number 1. Is it a series? Yes. There are more than one book in this series. You probably knew this already. I did not know that there's Chocolat. And then there is The Girl with No Shadow. That is number 2. And Peaches for Father Francis. And I'm looking on Joanne Harris's Amazon page, and there's a question of, are you going to write more in the Chocolat series? And she writes, I think so. Maybe not right now, but I don't think Vian will let me go so easily. Oh, and my to be read list just got longer. So definitely a story of moving and, obviously there's a lot more that goes on in the story of Chocolat than, at least in the movie. I have not read the book. I will not speak to the book because I know that's a pet peeve of mine, and it might be a pet peeve of yours. That, when somebody talks about the movie as though it is the book. All I know is that I am now going to have to read the book, and then the next book, and the book after that. Turns out that there are a bunch of books on this list that I have not read that I would now like to read, as is always the case. Every time I do one of these episodes and I start looking up books, then there's just more and more and more and more books that I want to put on my to-be-read list. It's just how it works. But like Hallmark movies, a lot of books have that premise of a move of some sort. So the main character may be making a move. Maybe they're moving away from their hometown. Maybe they're moving back to their hometown. Maybe they're changing jobs. Maybe they are running away from something. There's often a move that precipitates the plot and the action in a book. And so it's really, you could probably make that book. I mean, it's 81 books on that Goodreads list, but there are so many, many, many more books than 81 where people move. In fact, we've had authors on this podcast that have books about moving. If you go through the episodes, you'll find lots of books where the premise is someone moving to a new place and starting over or starting something new, etc. And it's a really good jumping off point. In fact, one book that I was talking about recently was in the Quiltmaker's Apprentice. I was doing that quilting episode, and I hadn't read The Quiltmaker's Apprentice, but when I found it on the list, I wanted to read it. Turns out that my library had it on audiobook, and so I was able to get it and listen to it, which brings me once again to Audible and my love of an audiobook. I have to admit that I didn't used to want to listen to audiobooks. I wanted to read books. But once I got started, I am now hooked because it allows me to be reading a book. Usually I'm reading a book. I have a book on my phone that I'm reading, and I have a book in the car or wherever so that I can listen to it when I'm commuting, when I can listen to it when I'm working out. There's a lot of times in my life when I could be listening to a book while doing other things. So Audible gives me that ability to listen to a book anywhere. Like I said, if you take advantage of this offer that is going on right now by going to audible.com/GSMC book or texting GSMC book to 500-500, you can get Audible for $6.95 for the first 3 months. Again, that is over half off of what their normal monthly fee is. It's a really good deal. And when you think about $6.95, just under $7, 3 titles a month for that $7, that's pretty amazing. You get one title that you can choose from their whole library, their whole catalog, and then you can choose 2 titles from their Audible originals. Those you can't get anywhere else. And they've got some really good selections. Some things that you're not going to find regular in your regular other audiobook sources. They've got a lot of full cast audiobooks, which I love. That's where you get multiple people reading. You get different characters as opposed to just one narrator. So they've really got some great options. And as I said, you can take advantage of this. $6.95 for the first 3 months. Just go to audible.com/GSMC book or text GSMC book to 500-500 and take advantage of this fabulous offer, either for yourself or for someone for the upcoming holidays. Let's go ahead and take our second break, and when we come back, we'll be wrapping up this episode about moving. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. We are talking today about moving and books about moving, and there are a million of them out there, and I would like to know, what are your favorite books that have a move as a major plot point? Or, what are the books in your life that when you think about moving, you think about, like in my case, the first thing that came to mind was the Little House series, but there have been lots. I mentioned authors on the podcast who have had books about moving. And if you remember episode 51, when I interviewed Mariuccia Mila about her book, Meet Me in Milano, it was about a young woman who ended up moving to Italy for what was meant to be, kind of a brief but not definite period of time. And so she moves to Italy, and that made me think, international moves. I mean, I've moved across the country, but I've never lived out of the country, and the logistics of that are fascinating to me. So, couple of questions for you. What are those books that you think of when you think about moving? Have you ever lived internationally? And if so, please tell me about it. I'd love to hear about it. But if you haven't, or if you have, either way, what are the books that you like about characters who move to another country? Something that I have never done, but I certainly know people who have done it. That is a whole different ballgame. And of course, there are a million books out there. There's another Goodreads list of moving to another country. And there are children's books about moving to another country. So, like I said, Mariuccia Mila comes to mind in the episode where we talked about Meet Me in Milano and the young woman who moves to Italy. It, of course, changes her life for a lot of different reasons. She has a whole bunch of different experiences. What are other books where people move to a different country? You want to talk about moving, makes me think of the Outlander series, which I have talked about before, and which I believe just started a new season on Stars. Maybe that's an episode for the television podcast, but that's not only moving to a different country, because they end up going from Scotland to America at one point, but that is a trip through time. So if you want to talk about moving, you could even talk sci-fi and time travel books, because I guess you're moving through time. It's not exactly moving unless you have a little bit of control over it. I shouldn't say that. Sometimes in time travel books, the moving is unintentional and they just find themselves in a different time. It's not exactly something that you pack up your stuff for, when you fall through time, but I guess you could still add that to the moving list. To be honest, you could take this moving theory theme in so many different directions, from books about actual moving, books about time travel, books that move us, if you want to go in that direction, books that take us on a journey. That could be a spiritual journey. That's a whole other topic. There's spiritual journeys. Maybe a book like Eat, Pray, Love, or something along those lines. Books that move us, and books about moving, and all of those good plays on words. We could take it in so many different directions. Again, what are your favorite books about moving? Or what are your craziest moving stories? I would love to hear that. I mean, thankfully we didn't have anything. Well, it was crazy in a lot of ways, but we didn't have anything too major, or we didn't lose anything major. We didn't have anything major break. I did lose the coffee for almost a week, and there were several days when I could not find the box with certain garments of a personal nature, but thankfully I did know where the dirty laundry was, so I was able to do laundry and have clothes to wear. But oh yeah, I know, I'm sorry, that was TMI, but I did find the coffee, and we are getting everything unpacked, and life is moving on. So, there you go. Moving on. That could be another topic. Moving on, not moving physically, but moving on from a traumatic experience, a breakup, moving on from, there's just so many ways that you could go in this. Please let me know what your favorite books are about moving, or your favorite moving stories, or the craziest thing that's ever happened to you while moving. Thank you so much for joining me on this very moving episode. I'll stop, I promise. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you will join me again on Tuesday when I will be talking with author Brad Schaefer about his historical fiction of Another Time and Place. I'm looking forward to speaking with him and hearing more about his writing process. That is a historical fiction book set in World War II. So please join me on Tuesday for that interview. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I hope you are not spending your weekend unpacking, which is what I will be spending my weekend doing, but I hope that you get to spend your weekend getting lost in a really good book. That is my hope for you. Thanks, and I'll see you again on Tuesday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.